everyone, welcome back to today's lecture. So today we'll be discussing about the Middle English period. So as you all know, I am starting a British literature series, and the first part of the video or the first video of British literature series was the Old English period. I have already made a video on Old English period, and then after the Old English period comes the Middle English period. So today we'll be discussing about the Middle English period. So let's start with the lecture. So the Middle English period spans from roughly from 1066 AD to 1500 AD, and it represents a transformative era in the history of the English language. So during this time, English evolved from the Old English, that was the Anglo-Saxon period or the Anglo-Saxon language, into a form much closer to what we recognize today as the modern English. So the period is defined by some significant linguistic, political, social, and some cultural changes. So it happened largely due to the Norman conquest of 1066, which had a profound impact on the English vocabulary, grammar, and literature. So now we'll be discussing about the historical background of Middle English. So as we know that it began after the Norman conquest of 1066. So William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, defeated the hallowed Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings in 1066 and became the King of England. So this event marked the beginning of the Norman rule in England and had a lasting effect on the English language. So as the William the Conqueror became the marked the victory of the his period, the Norman French language became the language of the English court, law, government, and the aristocracy. The Latin remained the language of the church and the scholarship, while the common people continued to speak Old English. Over the period of time, the interaction between the Anglo-Saxon, the Old English speakers, as the Anglo-Saxon were Old English speakers, and the Norman rulers, the French speakers. So the Anglo-Saxon rulers spoke Old English, and the French Norman rulers spoke French language. So this resulted in a blending of language, giving rise to the Middle English. So that's how the Middle English language came into being. So it was a shift from Old English to Middle English. And so the social and political changes also can be seen in the Middle English period. The first one was the feudalism. So the Normans introduced the feudal system to England, which structured society into a hierarchy of lords, vassals, and serfs. So this system reinforced the division between the French-speaking elite and the English-speaking commoners. And the most social changes that happened, that the 100-Year War happened. So the timing of the 100-Year War was from 1337 to 1453. So this series of conflicts between the England and France contributed to a rise in English nationalism. Eventually, it led to the decline of French as a prestigious language in England and the resurgence of English in public life. And the Black Death, it also had a great impact in the societal structure that changed in the Middle English period. So the timing of Black Death was, it happened from 1347 to 1351. So this Black Death was a kind of plague. It was significantly reduced the population of England, leading to labor shortage and shifts in social structures. So this also contributed to the rising status of the English language as the working class gained more economic power and more influence over the period of time. So that's how the social and political changes happened, and the rise of the merchant class happened in the Middle English period. So by the late 14th century, England had become the dominant language in England again, displacing French as the language of the court and the law. So the Statute of Pleading in 1362 made English the official language of the courts, and in 1385 schools began to teach in English. So the London dialect of Middle English, influenced by the East Midlands dialect, gradually became the standard form of the language. So due in large part due to the social and political importance of London. So these are the historical background of the Middle English period. So now we'll be talking about the regional dialects of Middle English. So we can see four major dialect groups like the Northern, Southern, West Midland and East Midland. It was divided in the basis of the Standard English. So one of the most noticeable changes from Old English to Middle English is the simplification of the inflectional system. Old English was heavily inflected language using various endings to indicate C's, gender and number. In Middle English, these inflections were gradually reduced and word order became more prominent for conveying meaning. For example, Old English had four grammatical cases like the nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. But by the end of the Middle English period, these distinctions has largely been disappeared. Means these themes they disappeared. So the Old English had grammatical gender, but this system disappeared also in the Middle English. Nouns were no longer characterized by gender, making English more like modern English in this regard. And the one of the most significant development in the Middle English was the influx of thousands of French words into the English vocabulary. These borrowings were largely related to law, government, religion, art, literature, fashion, and these areas dominated by the Norman aristocracy. For example, words like court, church, government, army, fashion, beauty, religion, these all words kind of entered into English during this period. Latin was the language of the church and scholarship. Also, it continued to influence English, especially in the areas related to education, theology, and science. Due to the earlier Viking settlements in northern England, Old Norse had already contributed to the vocabulary of the Old English. So during the Middle English period, words of Norse origin like such as sky, egg, anger, they remained a part of the language. So Middle English period spelling was not standardized and there was a great deal of regional variation. So the same word could be spelled in different ways even by the same writer. So the pronunciation underwent significant changes during this period. The most notable development is the beginning of the great vowel shift in the late 14th century, which drastically altered the pronunciation of the long vowels in English and marked the transition from Middle English to modern English. So this was all about the regional dialects of Middle English. We will be learning about some key features or key characteristics of Middle English period. So Middle English literature reflects the diversity and complexity of medieval society, covering a wide range of genres including romance, allegory, religious texts, drama and poetry. So much of the literature from this period was influenced by the French models, especially in the Romance genre, which often featured themes of chivalry, courtly love and some heroic quests. So the religious works continued to play a significant role with texts that focused more on the moral instruction, biblical stories, and life of the saints. So this was all about the key features that we find in the Middle English period. Also, in the case of grammar, loss of the inflectional endings, so it more relied on the word order and the vocabulary it significantly borrowed from the Norman, French and Latin. And as I have already said in the regional and dialectical slide, that the phonology, in the case of phonology, the vowel shifts the vowel, great vowel shift happened, and they kind of increase the use of prepositions and articles. And some literary developments also happened in the Middle English period. As I already said, the growth of secular literature alongside some religious works peaked in this period. And some of the notable works and authors of this era was, the first main author was Geoffrey Chaucer. He lived from 1343 to 1400. So Chaucer is the most famous writer of the Middle English period and is often called the father of the English literature. His most significant work is the Canterbury Tales, which was a collection of stories told by some pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. So Chaucer's use of London dialect helped to establish it as the standard form of Middle English, and his all works kind of reflected a wide range of themes from courtly love to religious hypocrisy. Some of his other notable works are Troilus and Cressida, the Parliament of Wars, the Book of Duchess. So these are the works by Geoffrey Chaucer, who was also known as the father of English literature. So he used some satire, humor, and social commentary. So we can see a wide variety of themes incorporated into the works of Geoffrey Chaucer. So now we will also learn about some other major literary work of the Middle English period. So the next one was William Lagland. So Lagland is best known for his allegorical poem Pius the Plowman, which was a complex narrative that explores the theme of religion, morality, and social justice. He was the predecessor of Chaucer. So the poem is written in a form of alliterative verse that harkens back to the Old English poetry, but with a distinctly Middle English style. So it has some themes of Old English poetry, but its style was like it was written in Middle English. And then comes the work of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which was published in the late 14th century. So this was an Arthurian romance written by an anonymous author, often referred to as the Gawain poet or the Pearl poet. And it is one of the finest example of the Middle English poetry. It combines some chivalric ideals, Christian values, and elements of folklore in its tale of Sir Gawain's quest to face the mystery of Green Knight. So this was all about the what? Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Then comes John Gower, who wrote from 1330 to 1408. So Gower was a contemporary of Chaucer, and he wrote in multiple languages, including English, French, and Latin. And his most famous work is Confessio Amantis, which was a long narrative poem in which a lover confesses his sins to goddess Venus and is instructed through stories on how to conduct himself properly in love. And we can see that the Middle English period also saw the production of numerous religious texts that aimed at educating the laity. So these include sermons, homilies, devotional guides, and many of which were written in English to reach a wider audience. So it has always thought of reaching to the wider audience. And some mystery plays and morality plays were also popular forms of religious drama during this period. And these plays were often performed in public spaces and depicted with the biblical stories or allegories about the struggle between the good and the evil. This was all about the works of Middle English period that has incorporated the themes we discussed that the Middle English period has. Now we will be learning that how the end of Middle English period was look like. So, and it led to the invention or evolution of the modern English period. So the first one was the printing press. The introduction of the printing press to England by William Caxton in 1476. Please remember, the introduction of the printing press to England happened by William Caxton in 1476. So it was a crucial factor in the transition from the Middle English to modern English. And the printing press helped to standardize the spelling and grammar and made literature more accessible to a wider audience. And Caxton's decision to print in the London dialect contributed to its becoming the basis for standardized English. And the great vowel shift, which began in the late 14th century and it continued into the 16th century as well, was a major change in the pronunciation of English vowels. So this shift resulted in the pronunciation of words that were being quite different from how they were spelled, leading to many of the peculiarities of the model English spelling. And by the end of the 15th century, the London dialect of English has emerged as the standard influenced by the court, the legal system, and the printing press. So, this form of English would continue to evolve into early modern English during the Renaissance. So this is all about the Middle English period, how it came into being, what is the key characteristics, features of the Middle English period, about its history, about its regional dialects, and how it came to its end. And then we learned that how it gave a prominent rise to the modern English period. So the Middle English period was a time of profound linguistic and cultural changes in England, as we learned from this whole video. And the blending of Anglo-Saxon, Norman French influence along with some Old Latin, Old Norse shaped the development of English into a more simplified and flexible language. Middle English literature from Chaucer to the anonymous authors of romance and religious works reflects a society that was in transition from feudalism to early nationalism, from a rigid social hierarchy to a more fluid, diverse culture. And understanding this Middle English period and its literature allows us to trace the roots of the modern English and appreciate the richness of the England medieval past. So this is all about the Middle English period. So that's it for today. If you all enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any kind of future lesson that I'll be posting in this channel. Bye. See you all soon in the next video.